In 1788, in the Central Highlands of Madagascar, a baby girl was born into an unremarkable commoner family. Her name was Ravo. She carried no royal blood, was not raised in any grand palace, and grew up instead among the hills and sacred traditions of the Merina people, the dynasty then ruling much of Madagascar. Ravo's fate might have passed in silence, like countless other women under feudal society, if not for one event that changed everything. An assassination plot against the king was uncovered. The whistleblower, none other than Ravo's father. This act of loyalty not only saved the monarch's life, it brought Ravo's family into the pages of history. As a reward, the king made a fateful decision. He arranged for Ravo to marry Prince Radama, the future heir of the Merina kingdom. Suddenly, a common girl became the wife of a man destined to be king, bestowed with the status of future queen. It sounds like a fairy tale, but the reality was far from it. The marriage had no love, no respect, and was merely a political transaction between the crown and a loyal subject. Radama, the young prince, was ambitious, progressive, and frequently engaged with Europeans, seeking to modernize Madagascar with Western ideals. He had little affection for Ravo, his wife, without noble roots, education, or political voice. They lived as strangers under the same palace roof. Ravo was abandoned in a cold world of luxury, childless, powerless, and forgotten. But within that silence, Ravo observed, listened, and waited. Being overlooked did not weaken her, it forged an iron will. One day, if opportunity came, she would no longer be a shadow in the palace. And that moment arrived when Radama suddenly died in 1828 without naming an heir. No one expected that the woman once most disregarded in the royal court would be the one to seize the throne through bloodshed, ruthlessness, and an unshakable steel resolve. In 1828, King Radama I, the progressive monarch, died suddenly. His death left not just a fragile kingdom, but also a massive power vacuum. Crucially, Radama had no legitimate children, nor had he designated a clear successor. The court spiraled into chaos. Nobles vied for power, royal factions quietly prepared for coups, and all eyes turned to the empty throne. In the midst of this turmoil, Ravo, the forgotten widow of the late king, stepped into the light. No one thought that a woman cast to the margins of court life, lacking royal blood, could pose a threat. But they miscalculated. Gravely, with quiet backing from loyal generals, Ravo struck first. She declared herself the rightful heir, taking the regal name Ranavalona I, meaning the chosen one, to protect the nation. But a title alone would not secure her throne. To hold power, she needed to eliminate all rivals. Within mere weeks, more than 30 royal family members were arrested, tortured, executed, or poisoned. Princes who could claim the throne, distant cousins, even former allies of Radama, all were dealt with. Madagascar had never seen such a brutal and decisive purge. Blood flowed inside the palace. Fear spread through the nobility like wildfire. No one dared question the authority of the woman who had once been invisible. No royal bloodline. It didn't matter. When foreign envoys asked by what right she ruled, she gave no genealogy or treaties, only this chilling declaration: I am the only one strong enough to protect this land from foreigners and traitors. Anyone who opposes me shall die. From a common girl forced into marriage, Ranavalona had trampled over corpses to seize the throne. And from that moment forward, one of the bloodiest and most infamous reigns in Madagascar as history began, the reign of the cannibal queen. After taking the throne through blood, Ranavalona I didn't stop at consolidating power. She launched a near 4-decade reign that Madagascar's history remembers as the Age of Fear, where even the smallest opposition could cost one's life. She ruled as though the entire world was her enemy, enemies from within, nobles, merchants, or civilians who doubted her legitimacy, enemies from without, colonial powers like France and Britain, and Christian missionaries spreading an alien faith. To Ranavalona, Christianity was more than a religion, it was a cultural weapon, a Trojan horse for European conquest. She declared war on it with brutal force, expelled all foreign missionaries from Madagascar, burned every Bible, church, and missionary school, and most savagely, ordered the execution of anyone who still practiced the Catholic faith. Sinners were crucified on wooden stakes, thrown from high cliffs into rushing rivers, or buried alive in clay. Others were tortured, burned slowly, starved in iron cages, or tied up and thrown into the jungle to be judged by wild beasts. Faith became a death sentence. Even those merely suspected of praying could not escape. Ranavalona didn't stop there. She reinstated one of the most ancient Merina rituals, tangween, a form of trial by poison. Anyone accused of treason, theft, adultery, heresy, had to drink water mixed with the poisonous tangween seed. If they survived after vomiting, convulsing, and coughing up blood, they were considered innocent, protected by the spirits. If they died, that was proof of guilt. The result? Tens of thousands died from this ritual in just the first few years of her reign. Even children, women, the elderly, no one was exempt. Tangween was not justice, it was a weapon of terror disguised as tradition. Ranavalona understood one thing: to rule for a long time, you don't need love, only absolute fear. That's why executions were always public, held in the central square. People were dragged into the marketplace, boiled alive in cauldrons, dismembered, or impaled and left to die as a warning. Once, a village was suspected of harboring Christians. The entire population, from old to young, was burned alive in their own homes. No one survived. These were not mere punishments, they were performances of power. A way for Ranavalona to declare to her entire nation, "I am the law, I am the divine, I am death." Once her rule of fear and blood was established, Ranavalona I moved to the next phase, turning Madagascar into a closed, impenetrable nation, a fortress of isolation in the chaotic 19th century. She knew well that the French, British, and other European powers were encroaching on Africa with trade, religion, and eventually, the chains of colonization. Ranavalona didn't wait for them to knock. She locked the gates and threw away the key. While Europe raced ahead with industry and gunpowder, Ranavalona chose another path, cultivating loyalty among her warriors. She built an army of 30,000 permanent soldiers, an enormous force for an island kingdom. They were trained harshly, surviving in the jungle, living in austerity, in exchange for one thing: uncheckable loyalty to the queen. Their weapons were strange hybrids. One hand held a traditional spear, the other an old musket, most from outdated trade deals. But their true strength wasn't firepower, it was faith. They believed Ranavalona was the embodiment of ancestors, the earthly vessel of the motherland's soul. With this army, she controlled not just the people, but crushed any signs of rebellion from western or southern tribes, where foreign influence had crept in. From 1835, Ranavalona expelled all diplomatic and trade representatives of France, Britain, and the U.S. All previous treaties were declared void. Busy ports fell silent, guarded by soldiers ordered to shoot any foreign ship on sight. No ambassadors, no churches, no merchants, no missionaries, no letters, no imports, unless for military use. Ranavalona sealed Madagascar like a medieval monastery, with an iron resolve: we are self-sufficient, and we don't need the world. Even Malagasy, who had studied French, converted to Christianity, or had contact with Europeans, were placed under surveillance, interrogated, or quietly disappeared. Not only did she cut off trade, Ranavalona ordered the destruction of all foreign cultural symbols, burn all books written in French or English, close schools established by missionaries, ban Western-style clothing, enforce whipping or even execution for speaking foreign languages in public. Language, dress, religion, way of life, anything smelling of the West had to be erased. Under Ranavalona's iron rule, Madagascar achieved the unthinkable in the 19th century. It avoided European colonization for over 30 years, while much of the African continent fell into imperial hands. But independence came at a price: blood, isolation, poverty, and the crushing of all hopes for reform. And behind this iron curtain, a question began to echo: was the queen protecting her nation, or imprisoning her people in a vast open-air jail? When speaking of Ranavalona I, many Western texts give her chilling nicknames: the Mad Queen of Madagascar, the Cannibal Queen, or even the most brutal killer of the 19th century. But are these just colonial propaganda designed to discredit a fierce native leader? Or were the horrors all too real? In the mid-19th century, when Madagascar remained completely closed off from the outside world, a handful of Western merchants and missionaries who had once lived there brought back horrific tales soaked in blood. Human corpses hung from tree branches as a warning to dissenters. Women forced to eat the flesh of their executed husbands convicted of treason, children boiled alive in sacrificial rituals. Real feasts with human flesh as the main course, with Queen Ranavalona seated at the center, enjoying the meal amid songs of praise. Some French traders even wrote in letters sent home, "I have never witnessed hell." But if hell exists, it must lie inside the Queen's palace. Of course, colonial history always walks hand in hand with slanderous propaganda. Any native leader who dared to defy Europe was portrayed as savage, brutal, and uncivilized. And Ranavalona, who expelled all missionaries, traders, and foreign soldiers, became a perfect target. Some modern historians argue that the cannibalism stories might have been exaggerated or fabricated by the French and British to justify their desire to rescue Madagascar from a tyrannical regime. However, one cannot deny that Ranavalona's rule was marked by extraordinary cruelty. Tortures such as boiling victims alive, forcing death marches across hundreds of miles, or live disembowelment were recorded not only by outsiders, but also by Malagasy people themselves. So, while there is no concrete proof that Ranavalona engaged in cannibalism, one thing is clear: she forged a reign so terrifying that every rumor became believable. Prolonged isolation and chronic fear pushed Madagascar into severe societal collapse. Hundreds of thousands died from forced labor, marching through jungles to build fortresses. Trade ground to a halt, famine spread, medicine deteriorated, and epidemics raged. Culture, education, and development were suffocated. People lived in deathly silence, where even a misplaced word could lead to an unexplained execution. A once promising kingdom became a walled-off hellscape, where only one voice was permitted to rise, that of the Queen. Ranavalona I died in 1861 at the age of 73, after more than 3 decades of iron-fisted rule. No grand funeral, no diplomatic procession, no mourning from the world. She died as she lived, in absolute isolation. Her son, Radama II, ascended the throne and immediately reversed all of his mother's policies, reopening trade, welcoming foreigners, and abolishing torture. But just 2 years later, he was assassinated by those who still believed Madagascar needed a strong, ruthless hand to survive the colonial storm. Ranavalona I, a cursed queen or sovereign who defended independence to the bitter end. History offers no easy answers. But one truth is undeniable: she became a symbol of a reign where darkness not only sat on the throne, it seeped into the soul of an entire nation. By the time she was in her 60s, Ranavalona was no longer the youthful queen who had overthrown regimes and defied Europe. She had become a frail old woman holding absolute power, increasingly consumed by paranoia and fear. Despite ruling with an iron grip, Ranavalona knew she was not loved, only feared. Throughout her 30-year reign, she eliminated every threat, from relatives and nobles to foreigners and even shamans, anyone who might challenge her throne. And with that came a constant obsession: who will betray me next? In her final years, she trusted no one, not even longtime servants from her youth. She never slept in the same room 2 nights in a row, constantly shifting chambers to avoid poisoning or assassination. Some nights, she ordered executions of courtiers simply because she dreamt they had betrayed her. To Ranavalona, Nightmares weren't just dreams, they were prophecies. She once said, "If my soul warns me of treachery, then the traitor's blood must be spilled to seal the future." No one in court dared look at her too long. No one spoke unless spoken to. A wrong glance, a mistimed cough, all could lead to a midnight execution. Her health began to decline rapidly in the early 1860s. Though over 70, she refused to share power or allow her son to take the reins. She still issued decrees, ruled on trials, and commanded troops. But her aging body could no longer match her ruling ambition. She became forgetful, irritable, and often disoriented. Once, she ordered the beheading of a senior official, convinced he was a French spy, even though he had served her faithfully for nearly 20 years. Court physicians advised her to rest, but she refused, stating, "If I stop, this kingdom will fall." On August 16, 1861, Ranavalona I suddenly died from a stroke at age 73. Death came swiftly, unexpectedly, and, strangely, peacefully, in stark contrast to her life of blood and shadow. There was no assassination, no traitors, no hidden daggers lurking in the dark as rumors claimed. After years of living in paranoid dread of a sudden death, she passed away in a way nobody expected, silent, unstaged, without a fight or final reckoning. After Ranavalona's death, Madagascar breathed a collective sigh of relief. Her son, Ranavalona II, swiftly ascended the throne and reversed all his mother's brutal policies, opened the kingdom again to merchants and missionaries, banned torture and forced labor, legalized Christianity, restored diplomatic relations with Europe. But Ranavalona II's reign of light lasted less than 2 years. Nobles loyal to the old regime assassinated him, fearing he would erase everything his mother had built. Yet Ranavalona's legacy persisted, in fear, in political culture, and in how Malagasy people viewed power. Once you rule by terror, you may find yourself swallowed by isolation. When Ranavalona I died in 1861, Madagascar seemed freed from a 3-decade nightmare. The court was no longer dominated by public executions, superstition-based trials, or the terror of being killed over a dream or a glance. Immediately after her death, her only son, Ranavalona II, took the throne. The young king overturned his mother's legacy and ushered Madagascar into a completely new era, abolished torture and forced labor, legalized Christianity and allowed missionaries to return, opened borders and welcomed European merchants, advisors, and clergy, particularly from France, introduced modernization reforms in education, the military, and the legal system. Many called him the Prince of Light after such a long reign of darkness, but that light did not last. The nobility, who had benefited from the previous authoritarian regime, resented Ranavalon's progressive reforms. They believed he was betraying tradition and handing Madagascar as sole over to the French, whom his mother had fiercely resisted. Less than 2 years later, Ranavalona II was assassinated in a palace coup. His body disappeared mysteriously, leading to whispers that he had escaped. His successor was his former wife, Ranavalona, who was forced to rule under the nobles' terms. Although Ranavalona I is often criticized as cruel, tyrannical, and superstitious, she foresaw something her descendants did not. Europe did not come merely to evangelize, they came to seize territory. During her reign, she shut Madagascar's gates, expelled foreign missionaries, hunted down Christian converts, and banned foreign interference. She believed that if she did not shut the doors, Madagascar would soon become a colony. And indeed, her warning proved true. In 1895, just 3 decades after her death, France officially invaded Madagascar. The king and queen of the time were exiled, the monarchy vanished. Madagascar became a French colony and would not gain independence until 1960. Today, Ranavalona I remains fiercely polarizing. For many Western historians, she symbolizes brutality, oppression, and despotism, a tyrannical queen who sowed death across her kingdom. But for numerous Malagasy, she is a symbol of anti-colonial resistance, the leader who preserved independence for 3 decades amid European imperial pressure. No matter how you view her tyrant or patriot, one fact stands. Ranavalona I was the only 19th century woman to successfully defy all European empires and win, at least in her lifetime. In modern history, few female monarchs left such a profound yet controversial legacy. She ruled Madagascar for 33 years with an iron grip and a torch of hate. To the west, she was violence incarnate, superstitious isolation personified. To many Malagasy, she was a warrior queen who kept her land free when most of Africa was falling under colonial grip. No one can deny the savagery of her reign. She executed tens of thousands, burned people alive, impaled them, forced poison drinking, and imposed torturous punishments not only on enemies, but also on civilians suspected of Christianity, ominous dreams, or even an unruly glance. She expelled missionaries, closed the country, banned the faith, banned trade, banned the Latin script, banned Western culture, turning the kingdom into an isolated fortress amid a globalizing world. Western merchants, missionaries, and explorers of the time depicted her as a cannibalistic demon queen, a crazed monarch with a crown, or Africa's Nero. Yet, the question remains, what if she did not act so fiercely? Could Madagascar have retained its independence? Ranavalona fought not just against European weapons, but against their ideology, their religion. She saw what many native kings did not. Behind the cross came soldiers. Behind trade came guns. And behind the church came colonization. In a 19th century Africa being swallowed by European powers where tribes and kingdoms fell within years of friendly trade, she chose brutality to preserve identity. History proved she was not entirely wrong. After her death, kings opened borders and negotiated with France. Within decades, Madagascar became a French colony and only regained independence almost 70 years later. Ranavalona I was not a saint, nor was she simply a monster. She was a symbol full of contradictions, born in an age where every decision carried the weight of national survival or destruction. She slaughtered to prevent invasion. She suppressed religion to safeguard tradition. She closed the borders to defend autonomy. Her actions pose enduring questions. How far should a leader go to protect culture and independence? When forced to choose between brutality and being conquered, which path is the right one? Madagascar remains divided in its view of Ranavalona I. Some hail her as a national hero, including her in textbooks as a symbol of decolonial resistance and sovereignty. Others see her a dark stain in history, a ruler who turned the country into a vast prison. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Ranavalona I was a product of a bloody era. She fought with the ferocity of someone prepared to sacrifice everything rather than submit to any foreign power. And it is that uncompromising ferocity that makes it impossible to definitively label her either hero or tyrant. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next investigation.